Awesome. And we are live. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think it's been at least I think the last time we spoke, we both were at High Radius, and
And we were in office pre-COVID.
yeah, yeah. It's been a while. So I'll tell you the first time we met. Also, that story. So just as an introduction, hey guys, I'm the founder of Sphere Growth. We're a marketing agency. Now, this agency started 2 years ago, and I've built. So this is the first large team that I got to build, and a lot of people in the team are now either managing their teams or building their teams. And so I'm also seeing that second order consequence of, hey, if you build a team and then they build a team, what happens then, and what gets translated, what they change. And so it's been an interesting journey for us. We as an organization, right? And again, I'm picking out things which I think would be relevant, and where my questions come from. So I really wanted to do this session with you to understand, because we right now are like, we have like three levels in the organization till now, right? In quote unquote levels, right? So as it grows and we expand further into a much more complex organization, this is going to be very useful for me. So thank you so much for taking this. Just a quick intro of, obviously, you as well, right? uh, and feel free to add anything. So I had known that you're in sales, right? Like that was my impression of, hey, the servo is the person in sales at Spear Growth. You lead a team. And I've heard again stories, and I'll maybe reveal a couple of, or like I'll just like share a couple of those stories with you today. But that's what I knew. But then when I looked at your experience, right, then I got to know, oh, you've done partnerships, you've been in the product teams, you've been in a lot of different teams as well. And when I read through your experiences, right, like one thing that always stuck or like that jumps out to me is that you've always mentioned, hey, I built this team that did this in almost every one of the descriptions you've written in on your LinkedIn. So that's my understanding of who you are as a leader. And obviously I'll share other tidbits, but yeah, like, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me over. And just to answer your question on built teams, I think I've been fortunate. The time I spent at High Radius, prior to that also, but most I would say at High Radius, where I would often end up in a situation most people didn't want to be in. So I would get a problem that no one else wanted to pick up, or there was nobody else available to pick up at that point in time, and I would say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And in some cases, there was a team which wasn't doing well, so you got to rebuild. And then in some cases, there was no team. It's like, okay, go figure it out. And it's like, okay, we'll figure it out. So it was different learnings over the years. I think I'm thankful to Shashi and Bhanu and the team at High Radius, the leaders over there, to give me the opportunity and trust me that I'll be able to do it. So, yeah.
Wow. So the topic itself, right? And I hadn't heard the term like before you said it. The executional rigor is something I hadn't heard. What I had heard, and again, since it's sort of common from the time that we sort of work together, is a dot one team, right? And I
Right.
had my own interpretation of that, and that's one of the strategic pillars at Spear Growth as well, right? Now
Right.
that's something that we have brought in. So I have, and my like, understanding of that, like how do you define, let's say, executional rigor, and also maybe with that context of maybe like how do you define dot one executional rigor, and how do you define or differentiate, or is this the same thing, or yeah, like how do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think what we called a dot one team is basically one in a thousand, right? So a
Yeah,
really high performing team. So, if you take all your champion teams and make them play a season, a series, whatever you
yeah,
call that, the one that wins is that um, dot one team. is the way you want to
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
about it. I think executional rigor is what gets them to become that dot one team,
Mhm.
right? So the way you want to think about executional rigor is, there are certain aspects that make a team a winning team, right? Of course, it's the selection of the players or the people in that team. So you got to really identify A players or top players, put them in that cohort and get them to perform a certain series of tasks. But then how they perform those tasks, what differentiates them from the rest of the team, right? So I really like, I'm sure a lot of us like and appreciate Dhoni as a captain. And he's done really good stuff for the Indian cricket team. And I like to use sports as an analogy because a lot of people are able to relate to it. And in India, cricket is the number one sport. So I like to use cricket as an analogy here, and team sport, right? So Dhoni is like benchmark for all of us. And if you notice, there's one common theme, no matter whether they're winning or they're losing. He always says it in his conference meetings, no, I mean, presentations after the match, post-match presentations. He says, I just ask the boys to follow the process, keep doing the same thing over and over again, and the results will follow. So I think executional rigor for me, in very, very simple terms, would be that process done, practiced over and over again, repeatedly till you perfect that art, and you start becoming a champion winning team from that point, right? So for me, that's what executional rigor is: rinse and repeat. Figure out what's the right process, first of all. What are the things that you need to do on a consistent basis, and then keep rinse and repeat over and over again. Is all that it is.
So this I had read this. I think this article which defined an expert, and that is very similar to how you're defining, let's say, executional rigor, right? They said that, and I don't remember it exactly, but then it basically talk about that, hey, you need a lot of repeated attempts. You need very quick feedback on your attempts. You need to have, for example, just done things and messed up and known all the different ways you can actually mess up as well, right? So that's what I had. uh, I think that resonates very closely, right, with
Yeah.
what you're talking about in executional rigor, essentially.
Yeah. It's pretty much the same. You take all the successful people that you know around the world, they're successful at something, right?
Mhm.
Um, you take an actor, let's say Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh
Mhm.
Khan, Akshay Kumar, right? You take a sports person, you take, I don't know, Virat Kohli, Dhoni, Sachin Tendulkar,
Yeah.
right? People that you know. You take somebody at work. Now, I don't want to name somebody at work because, the audience is very vast. No, I
Yeah.
think if we had one common person, names are given so far, people will, resonate with them. But you take the one person at work, that you really look up to, or set of people in your career, you'll have less than a handful that have been
Mhm.
amazing at what they do. And there's a common pattern in all these people, right?
Mhm.
Of course, they're famous, people know them, but there's a reason they got there. And the reason they got there is they first decided what they wanted to do. Sachin said, I want to be a cricketer. Shah Rukh said, I want to be an actor. Some entrepreneur said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And then they started learning what they needed to do. And they kept doing it. And I remember, it was one of the Harsha Bogle sessions. He was talking about Sachin Tendulkar, and he says, this boy was aged 14 and he had a routine. Every morning he would practice for 2 hours. Then he would play a cricket game the whole day. Then he would come back and practice for another 2 hours. And he did this for non-stop, I don't know what, 55 days. It takes a lot to do that, right? He would be exhausted. He'd fall asleep on the table. But that is executional rigor. And on the other hand, and Ishan, I don't know if you remember when you joined High Radius, there was an induction, and I gave the example of Sachin Tendulkar and a lesser known cricketer called Vinod Kambli, right? Now, a lot of the audience probably were born after Kambli stopped playing cricket, so they may or may not know him. But he was, you know, the same generation as when Sachin started. They played Shield cricket, school cricket in Mumbai together. They had a record for the highest number of runs in a partnership, and Vinod Kambli at the time was touted to be the most talented cricketer available in, Indian cricket, or probably up to that point. And everybody said, "Oh, this is the guy to look out for," and very classy. When we would see him play cricket, he was very classy. But he never made it beyond a few matches. You know, imagine someone highly talented, probably in the limelight more than Sachin, but never made it. Sachin, on the other hand, ended up being, the greatest of all time. And the reason was he kept perfecting his art. He kept repeating what he did. You look at someone like Amitabh Bachchan, right? He's probably 80 plus today. He's still the first person on the set. He still rehearses his lines. He doesn't need to do it, but he does it. It just becomes part of their, muscle memories, their work ethic. It's the effort that they want to put in. So it's all about that. Our entrepreneurs, you see, our founders, the founders, and here's another interesting one. You think of, let's say, Steve Jobs. We all know he was a difficult person to work with, but he was very intense. He was one of the best founders of his time. Or you think of a Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. These guys wake up in the morning, they're thinking about work. They spend about 15 to 20 hours working. They're probably the hardest working employees within the organization. And that's what differentiates them from the rest. They keep doing it and repeating it till they get to that point. That is
So
executional rigor.
that's interesting, because so you've mentioned that there's I gathered 3 points, right? So focus or direction, then there's this constant, like, and that's why you're thinking about it all the time. Then there's the learning aspect of it, that you're learning how to do something, and then you build a process around it, and then there's consistency, which then leads to repetition or dedication, or the ability to trust a person and follow it consistently, right? But so all of these talk about a single person. How is that, how does that lead to a team, like, because you understand the question, right? These are all characteristics of a person. Is it just a bunch of people with these characteristics in a group is like a team of people with execution rigor, or what's needed to do that?
Yeah. So that's interesting. While these are individual people, the environment that all of them operate in is a team environment, right? So you think of Sachin was part of a 11-member cricket team. Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan are part of a probably 200 people movie making team. Of course, founders that we talked about have built thousands of people size organizations, right? So they're all operating in a team environment. They are people who lead by example. They become the benchmark. They set themselves as the benchmark, not because they want to set themselves as the benchmark. They're just trying to push themselves to do much better as a leader, as a manager. So first is, as an IC, the expectation is everybody puts in their best effort and keeps improving over a period of time. I think as a manager or as a leader, what our job, our role would typically be is first assembling this set of people. So if you notice, the other thing on my LinkedIn profile, I'm sure you noticed, was a lot of time I spend in recruiting, right? And I really believe that all great leaders, managers in the past, or even today, have always invested. So you don't spend time recruiting, you invest time, right? So they invest time in gathering the right set of people to perform those tasks, right? And even Jack Ma said, my job is not to do the work. My job is to get the work, find the smartest people and then make these smart people work together, right? So 50% of the game is assembling this set of 11 cricketers or 150 movie, people, or your organization, your team. The next part is then deciding, aligning with everyone, what's the goal, what are we aiming for, and how are we going to get there, right? So think of a military force, right? They have an objective. I need to, get on this peak and defeat the enemy over there. In cricket, I need to score so many runs. So you define your goal And then you create, or you simplify it for the individuals in the team, because all of them may not get it. What are the roles and responsibilities? Your job is to score runs. Your job is to take wickets. Your job is to do, in the work front, okay, your job is to generate leads. Your job is to close those leads into opportunities, into deals which we win. Your job is to build more product. So everyone has a role responsibility. So the leader, the manager is giving those roles within his or her team. They then decide to get to this goal or this objective, what are the things that need to be done? That is what we call a playbook. So good leaders, managers actually invest a lot of time building the right playbooks, processes for their team. And buying a tool, investing in a tool may not always be the right strategy. Sometimes you do have to, but if you don't have the right tasks listed out, you're not going to be able to get to your objective. It's like you might have the fanciest of FX teams in making a movie, but if your script is off, it's useless. Or you might have the most expensive cricket gear, but if you don't know how to do a simple cover drive and score runs, you're not going to win. So defining that playbook is what is important. And then the final piece is rinse and repeat. Are you following the playbook? Why are you not following the playbook? Do we need to improvise on that playbook? And that constant rigor, that constant effort in improving every day, waking up and feeling, am I better than what I was yesterday? If not, what do I need to change? Where did I go wrong and how can I be better? So the challenge is not to be better than anybody else. It's ironic. In school, we always had first, second, third, and you're always competing against the person who came first. But the person who came first is only competing against one person. That's themselves. So your best people actually compete against themselves. Best teams compete to be a better version of themselves. Best managers push their teams to be better versions of themselves. So it's defining, again, it comes back to the same thing. Defining the goal, lining up the tasks that you need to do to get to that goal. And then how do you, constantly do those tasks and improve over there?
So just like summarizing what I took away from this, and just like please correct me if I'm wrong, add anything that I missed out. So the first thing that you need to do, so in a team, based on what I understand, the leader of the team is actually very important because that person actually builds the team itself. So there wouldn't be a team without the leader because the leader built the team. So one, the leader himself or herself needs to set the example of what kind of how, just like set an example by their actions, not by saying things. That's the first thing. Then second, 50% of the work is done when you actually when you invest time into building the right team. Third is you set a common goal, vision, you help them understand, okay, like where needs to be done, but then that's not enough. You really need to then simplify that into specific roles of who needs to do what, and there has to maybe even be very easy to identify tasks out of that. um, and then to get the task done properly, there might also need to be playbooks on exactly how to do that very well.
Not might need to, there will
Okay.
need to be. At
There
some
will be
point, in the initial phase, you need to figure out, what needs to be done. So in the initial phase, maybe there are no playbooks, but at a certain stage of maturity, you will have to make that a machine. At that point, you will need playbooks.
Okay, understood. And
So you don't need a
finally,
play. I'll just one last thing. You
yeah,
don't
yeah,
need a playbook for a 3 people team, but you need a playbook for a 30 people team.
perfect. Yeah. So, and I'll just ask what I missed out. So we have a, and again, this is I'm asking for myself, and then I also go through a couple of questions that I think a few folks have. But then, so at Spear Growth, we have a framework for managers. And like,
Okay.
how do you become a good manager? So I try to create a framework. I call it a QDV1 framework, a quick, dirty version one, right? Because it helps me get things done faster. So the framework means that the manager needs to do 6 things at Spear Growth, right? So one, um, maintaining continuity slash firefighting, right? So if something breaks, it's on you, figure it out, get it done. Second is just improving comms and reporting at all types of time. And again, we're a service company. That's paramount to what we do. Third is building processes. Fourth is employee engagement. Fifth one is constant training. And then sixth one is R&D also, right? Because like, hey, how do you improve any aspect of the team all the time, which is similar to how do you improve yourself? I think the thing that I really missed is actually building the team itself. Like you have to hire, like which I think I've missed completely. Is there anything else that you can like spot that, hey, this is just completely missing in the framework that we have? I can repeat it.
No, I'm just saying. So I think it's always hard to
Yeah,
answer this question at a broad level.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to be honest, to give you a very, very precise answer that will actually help you, maybe I should, spend or invest time with you to understand more of what's happening, what's not, what's
perfect.
working, what's not. I think every
Yeah,
organization's culture is unique to that organization. There's no right and wrong. There's a certain way of operating that you need to. But from an executional rigor point of view, I think the one thing I will call out, and most people miss, is yes, we define processes, and unfortunately, we expect people to follow them and follow
yeah,
them correctly and give you the results without actually going back and seeing are people doing that and are we getting the result? Tying the outcome or the output metrics to the input. So are we measuring it and are we tying it to what tasks are we performing and is that translating to an output? So in in
yeah.
in the sporting analogy, right? Yes, we told the team what they need to do, but are they scoring the runs that we expect them to score? If not, what do they need to do differently from a batting point of view to be able to score those runs? So measuring and analyzing that, you know,
So
um,
I think
that's where we miss the bus for the most part. Yeah.
So I think I'll just ask a follow-up question to this, and then we'll take the questions that we've had on LinkedIn, right? So,
Hmm.
how do you measure it? Like, since you mentioned the hey, we really need to measure it. We need to hold the team accountable. We need to figure out, or you need to sort of say, and you know what? Before I ask the question, I'll share a story of yours that that one I
Okay.
told you. I've heard a lot of stories of people that hey, like this is how working with server looks like, right? Like one thing that I'd heard is you set really really high standards for your team. Like even if they're new, if they are like if they're new to the organization, if they're new to the career standpoint, you would not. And this is my takeaway from the stories that I've heard is that you would never accept anything below par. And this is I think and you would just for example like hey, it needs to be done, which means it needs to be done. You wouldn't take excuses. You would be like hey, this is the standard I've set, and you really have to follow it. And I right, and then you would trust the team to actually do it. And then you would actually give feedback, uh, and it would be strict feedback. Like it would be like very very I think uh, specific feedback
Constructive
that these
feedback is
are
what I call it. Yes, specific
yeah.
and constructive.
Yeah, so that hey, these are the places where or if let's say something wasn't done right, you wouldn't say that okay, you're like hey, this wasn't done in the right mindset, or this wasn't done the way it should have been done. You might have to do it again, and you would set a standard which is very high. And I think that's something I had missed out quite often initially, where I would let things be like okay, yeah, it's fine and things. But now I'm trying to realize that hey, like you get what you I cannot find the quote, but you whatever you sort of allow in your team, you get that. And it's not like you're being unreasonable, right? If you set realistic reasonable expectations from the team, and then you need to make sure that that standard is set. And then I think that's a something that I also did miss in the frameworks. I really appreciate that. So that's something I've heard from all of your stories also. So how do you
Yeah.
measure KPIs,
Right.
action rigor? Yeah.
So yeah, so I think first is I'll answer your question or I'll say a couple of quick things on setting high standards. I think a team will become a champion team only by setting the highest benchmark and standards for themselves, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be, I won't take names, but let's say there's a
Yeah.
cricket World Cup coming up. You don't want to say, I also played and I also ran the World
Yeah.
Cup. You want to be the team, if you want to be the team that picks the World Cup, you have to perform at that level consistently. So you start with, and whether you're new, your first World Cup, your first series, your first match, or you've been there for the longest time, the expectation is to perform at that level to win that, right? And you look around at leaders, managers who have been successful. And for me, of course, there are some in our real life, but Steve Jobs is the classic example of setting really high standards, right? And you read any of these books, whether it's Netflix founders, whether it's Amazon founders, whether it's Snowflake, all of them say the same thing: set high standards for yourself and high standards for the team, and you don't accept anything that's subpar. So that's one. And I'll come to your question on answering on how do you measure performance, right? And a lot of fancy terms we hear these days: KPIs, KRAs, OKRs, OSTs. I don't know what all their fancy terms, but for me, the way I like to simplify it without creating a marketing jargon out of it is, there's an output metric that you want to measure. To get to that, there are a set of tasks that you need to perform, and there should be a way to measure that input, right? And for the most part, most organizations focus on just the output. Now, I'll give you an example. And of course, you started off with me being a sales leader. Sales is really close to my heart. So I'll start with sales as an example, but we can extrapolate this to almost any team, right? So in sales, most companies measure and reward people on the achievement, on the revenue, on the, whatever quota they've attained. And you're like, okay, wow, this person is at 105%, 110%, 80%, and they get rewarded according to that. Now, think of a complex sales cycle, which might take, I don't know, 6 to 12 months to close at an average. Are you going to wait for 12 months to realize, oh, this person was not performing? Would you not want to act sooner? To be able to act sooner, this person needs to do a certain set of tasks that you can measure upfront early. If they are building more pipeline, if they're doing more calls, if they're reaching out to more prospects, the odds of them converting more is going to be high. So you then define what your input metrics would be. Okay, I need you to have completed so many discovery calls in the first, 2 months. I need you to have moved so many deals from stage 1 to stage 2 to mid-stage deals, right? So you define what it is and you start measuring them early. So month 2 onwards, you know whether this person is going to work out or not, number one. So you get early signs. Number 2, you have the opportunity to give constructive feedback to that team member. If they're on track or they're off track, if they need to pull up their socks, or they're doing fine, continue doing what you're doing. So defining and measuring those is the hard part. After that, it's just bunch of spreadsheets, tools, and Salesforce, HubSpot, all that stuff, right? So you just pull information, but how do you define and how are you going to measure is the hard part. But the same thing applies to, I would say, marketing as an example. You think about it. The output that you're measuring is, I need to generate leads. The input is you're doing a series of tasks, right? So think of, let's say, ABM or outbound. What are you doing? You're sending emails, making cold calls, right? Maybe LinkedIn messages counts as emails, let's say. So quantity, what is the quantity or number of emails you're doing, number of cold calls you're making, is what I would measure. Quality, as a manager, I'd sit down and review. You know, you're missing a what's in it for them over here. You're missing, and if that constant feedback is not helping, this person is not working out for my team. Maybe this person is not meant to play cricket, put them in a football team, but definitely not my cricket team, right? Uh, so you're measuring the quality, you're measuring the quantity, and then you're measuring the conversions, or how many of these calls have been scheduled, how many of those calls actually converted, are you improving on those metrics? So you're using numbers to drive some of those decisions or give you insights into how you run the team. That's how I would measure. And then every team would be different. There's no one size fits all. Every business is different. I think it will be different for different companies. Some are in really fast motions, product led growth, where maybe sales metrics would be very different, or marketing metrics would be very different from an enterprise business where the motion is very, very different. So same thing goes for products, same thing goes for support, so on and so forth.
I'll add something here, right? So because I had heard this, so two points here, and feel free to like disagree or shift something, right? So when I had heard this advice earlier, right? The problem was I couldn't implement it at my team at Spear Growth because um, I thought it wasn't like not every role is measurable, because every time that the anyone would give an advice like this, it would always be for roles that I thought these are easy to measure input metrics for. That was my um, that was my sort of excuse. I think that, hey, this is why I think input metrics cannot be measured. And I'll just maybe share on my end like how we've, so recently, for example, at Spear Growth, we don't have yearly reviews. You cannot get promoted at Spear Growth no matter how long you've been with us. But for example, if you are at a role, you know the KPIs of the next role. If you hit the KPIs of the next role for 3 months, you get promoted. You don't have to sort of like, that's it. Like that's all you have to do. If you can do the next role, you get to it. That's how we sort of made it. Now, to do that, we obviously have to have very specific KPIs, and it's been a struggle because if you make it so important to people, for example, a measure like, let's say, like a copywriter, how do you make that measurable? Or let's say a performance marketer where you don't really have, that's how I would think like, hey, this is just not possible. um, we've seen a huge difference, or at least I've become a huge believer in what you're saying recently, where we've realized that, oh, you'll have to maybe create a system to then be able to measure it. For example, just like you said, the amount of copy can, we've made an entire system to figure out, okay, what's like the amount of work that's been done. And as exactly as you said, like now we have a head of copy who sits down and reviews every single copy, and there's like a quality of number of times it had to get reviewed. So those are like the two metrics which then
Correct.
make up an KPI.
In fact, I'm building a new team here yesterday, and I was
Mhm.
in my new organization, and I was having a conversation with one of the
Mhm.
people that we have in the team, and he said, "How do you measure this? This is very qualitative." And I said, "Hold
Yeah.
on, think of it this way, right? There is one measure at the end of the day. We're going to say, is this person or is this team successful? Is India winning in cricket or not? Is Virat Kohli scoring 100 runs or not, right? So there is one single measure that is going to define, did you do well or not? Help me understand what is the right thing for this team. When you define that, then it becomes easy. Don't, I think the other mistake I've seen a lot of people do is they pick stuff that is easy to measure, and hence this becomes the KPI. The other way around, or the right way to do it, is you decide what needs to be measured. We'll get creative on how to measure it. We'll figure a system out, but then at least you're measuring the right thing. So you're measuring success the right way. Otherwise, you'll hit numbers, but the team is not doing well. It doesn't make sense, right? Yeah.
That's very interesting because, so like the toughest one for us, I think, have been things like roles like, I think, ads, roles like SEO. It's been such a struggle because we've I think we're on our iteration 3 of KPIs right now. So basically 2 iterations of KPIs have failed. uh, I'm very open about stuff like
No,
this,
that's
right? We
fine. I think
tried.
failure is part of growing up. I think we beat it down too much as kids. Oh, this person failed. It's not bad. Failure is not bad. Failure is part of learning.
Yeah.
It's fine. Don't. Yeah, it's
So
fine. You
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
fail
yeah,
fast, freeze
perfect.
fast. Yeah.
So we went through like two measures of KPI for the performance marketing, couldn't figure out. And now I think what we've realized is, hey, like everyone, I think, or I was trying to make something which is very perfect. I had this complex formula for did this increase, that increase, but then it was just not in their control. And then the team knew it wasn't this stuff is not in our control. Just like will the sale close on a certain day is not completely in your control, even though you can influence it, right? So one, I was trying to, okay, is it influenceable enough? Maybe not to 100%, but to, is it like 80% influenceable? And uh, so for example, for performance marketing, we've come up with things like, okay, the number of experiments you run every month, that is measurable. And even if an account is mature, we won't ever sort of get lazy and just not do it, right? Like, so okay, that was one. Or we call it OARs, complete observation action result. Or like how happy is the client, that's like a weekly engagement there. So we are able to now figure out, okay, there is a way. And so I wasn't, I think I've
And it
always
will
felt.
evolve. What is right today may not be right tomorrow. It
Yeah.
will evolve. If someone has, I think the best thing that I learned is this is my idea.
Hmm.
It's not the final idea. If
Yeah.
someone has a better idea, please call it out. And please let me know why is it better. I'm happy to adapt to it. So this is the KPI today. If you feel there is a better way to measure it, I'm happy
Yeah.
to have a discussion. If we agree that it's a better way, let's do it.
Yeah, I
Nothing
think
is
that's
set in
another.
stone.
That's also a great point, because I had a very hard time setting KPIs for the team, because I thought it's going to, this is the final thing. There was a finality to
So
it.
crowdsource,
Yeah.
crowdsource. There is a point for this. There is a time for discussion. There is a time for execution.
Yeah.
This is the time for discussion. If you have a concern, raise it now. If you want to discuss, raise it now. Now that we have agreed, it is time for execution. All
Yeah.
hands on deck. We are in wartime. I'm not sitting and discussing whether we should go to this frontier or that frontier. Your job is
Yeah.
follow instructions, get it done.
Yeah.
We had a time
Perfect.
for discussion, inside the war room out over there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Perfect. I'll just like to end the session. I'll just quickly ask a couple of questions that I think
sure.
the audience had, right? So the first one was from Ben Gasnick. So he basically asked, you can read it on the screen also, but so you did mention that, hey, there has to be some sort of a strategy that, not exactly like, there has to be a strategy that you create, and that's how you simplify the roles of every person, right? Now let's say the strategy itself isn't working anymore, and the team is feeling stuck. They're sort of, maybe they're even doing the work, but it's not, they, everyone can see that, hey, we're not going to achieve the targets. What do you do then? It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Ben, good question. So I think again, I'll go back to sports, or maybe I'm talking military situation right now. But I think if you simplify it, a strategy is broken, you will get early signs pretty quickly, right? Again, you're measuring input metrics, indicators, you're measuring the output. Both of them are low. There is something wrong in what you're trying to achieve. I think as an individual contributor, the best thing to do is raise that out with your manager, with their manager. But remember, most leaders, most managers have too many problems of their own, right? And you add one more to their plate, it's probably not going to help the situation. So always lead with, if you can, lead with a solution, or give a couple of options that I think we should do this. I think, and of course, use numbers or use logic to back yourself. So I think the strategy in marketing is broken around, I don't know, SEO. Let me tell you why I think it's broken. Here is some numbers to prove my point. Here is some additional facts that will prove my point. However, having said that, I think this is the way forward, or this is my suggestion. If I had to run this team, this is how I would do it. So Don't leave it with, hey, I think your strategy sucks. You don't know what you're doing, and walk away. That's not what anybody wants to hear. You want to be able to come up with a solution, and that's when leaders rise to the occasion, right? That's when new leaders are born. That's when people feel, okay, Ben can be an amazing manager or a leader because he has the right thought process. He's thinking about the team. He's thinking about a solution. He's thinking about how to make it work. Uh, Does that answer?
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I mean, you just have to do it. Essentially, like it happens and you have to just
Take
pivot.
charge of the situation. You're
Yeah.
in war and you just need to take charge. You can't say, "Oh, I think my strategy sucks and the enemy is going to kill all of us and I'm going to, die." Okay, so what are
Yeah.
you going to do about it? Do you want to? No, you don't want to. You got a
Yeah.
team of people around you, so you just
Yeah.
go about that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you hear me? I lost audio.
Oh, sorry. This is the other question that I got, right?
Yeah.
So that we got. So one was basically like, okay, you already have a team, right? They are,
Mhm.
I mean, let's say, or and very often, right, there is a team in place. Right? Or even if when you
Mhm.
hire someone, or at least I
Yeah.
cannot hire someone who I would know is no matter what I do, I would know that hey, they if I expect execution rigor out of them, if this is the kind of standards I said, will they be able to rise to the occasion or not? I'm not sure. Right now, let's say if you're facing resistance, or I'm not sure how else you would. So, are you?
Is that not natural? That's natural, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you deal with that?
It's just like how my parents dealt with me when I was a kid and they tried to discipline me. No, I'm just joking. I think I like to lead with context whenever I'm setting something up. So I would say, okay, this is what we are doing. This is why we are doing. This is how it's going to benefit the organization. This is how it's going to benefit you as well. So there's always a what's in it for them. There will still be the odd one that is resistant to change. Personally, and I'm going to be a little harsh here, but I like a three-strike rule. Like in baseball, we have three strikes. Someone is strike three, they're out. Um, I like to run a tight ship where everybody's aligned to the mission, to the goal. I do not have time to sit down and, you know, keep repeating what the mission is, what the goal is. I will give it a shot, I will try. But if it's not making sense to someone for whatever reason, maybe they're just not aligned to it or they're just not used to it. I don't have all life to sit down and invest. I just, build a team without them, move forward. It's simple as that. I can't be
So,
sitting in the middle of a war or battle and explaining to my team that, oh, you know what, we need to fight this enemy, can you please help me, here is a gun. I don't have time for that. I mean, I got a enemy at my doorstep, I need
yeah.
to fight out. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, so I think there's two frameworks that helped me with this, right? And there's one person in my team, Sarji. He's just like taking it too hard. He repeats it almost every 2 days back to me also. So the framework is that if someone is not doing what you want them to do, they're not doing it because of one of three reasons. One, they didn't know they had to do it. So you weren't clear enough in your processes. Check that, right? Like, okay,
Correct.
ask them. Second,
Can happen.
you don't know how to do it, right? And the third is they aren't motivated enough to do it. So those are the three things. Go through it, and then the fourth one would be maybe they're not a good fit, right? So that's when I think apart from the three, what you have to look at. I think that's how I love that framework. And the second framework that sort of made like it's not easy at all still, but I think it's made it more easy for me to think about it at least. Is that so as a leader your job is to take the decisions which are best for the the decision that is going to impact the collective, like have the highest positive impact on the collective good or something like that, right? Like that's the decision you need to take. So if you are taking a decision in favor of one person in the team, but then that is hurting everyone else in the team and it's hurting them a lot more,
Bad
then you're doing
decision.
a disservice to the entire team. Yeah.
Correct.
So
Fair enough.
that's
Good framework. And it makes sense. It should work.
yeah. And then this is the last question, and then we'll wrap up. unless anyone has anything else. But for example, yeah, like just this is a tough one, right? Like how do you keep your team engaged? So yeah, just like how what do you do here?
I think different, and this becomes a little bit of manager style, leadership style. Different people do different things. Um, it's also a function of the pulse of the team, the demographics, you know, what age group are they in, how do you relate to them. um, I think doing stuff together first and foremost. And I know a lot of organizations are remote today or hybrid. I think to build trust and bonding, for me personally, I really feel being together in the same office at the same time really adds a lot of value. Um, I'm not completely against the work from home culture, but I feel if you are trying to build that bonding, if it exists before that, it's easy, right? A lot of my really good friends at High Radius were there because we had bonded before the COVID. A lot of people who joined during and after that were not, I was not able to relate as much with them. And it gets difficult. Um, but there are creative ways that you can do it online as well. And it does not involve giving away free gifts all the time. There are other activities that can be done as a team. There are lots of good ideas out there. I think spending time or investing time to understand each other, know each other better, definitely helps bonding with people. So have a genuine interest in, okay, I'd love to know more about Ishan. Who is his family? Whom does he spend time with? What does he do in his free time? Is it similar? Is it not? Have conversations with him around that. As you know people better, you'll start and then see where he may be struggling and I may be able to help. And if it's not too much out of the way, I would go out and do it. Right. So that builds trust between two people then. Now I know Ishan, trust me. He knows I'm looking out for him. I understand him. He'll reach out to me when I need help. He'll also introduce me to more people and tell me, hey, meet Servo, he's a good friend. You can trust him. Initially, maybe not, but at some point, if I repeat the same process with Uday, we will probably have trust with each other between each other. And that's how the bonding starts. Without trust, there is no team, right? Then it's very transactional. And for me, army, sport, and especially sport during the pandemic is great example because they were all the time together. For me, growing up in a hostel was very important. Learning of my life. I spent a lot of time with teams offshore in the middle of nowhere, on a oil rig in the middle of water or in the middle of a desert or snow or wherever. And we had a lot of time with each other that we would get to learn and know each other. And I know this person is looking out for me when I'm there, when I'm not able to see, and they have my back. So that's how I would want to build trust. Yes, taking them out for drinks, food, uh, games is a good idea once in a while, but doing the right activities with them is also important. We had this amazing event back in High Radius called Umixo, if you may remember, Ishan. I think the amount of time people spent there and the relations and the trust that came out because, people are looking out for each other and they're trying to win as a team. At the end of it, there's a lot of trust and bonding that is built. And that was one of the objectives of that event. So there are many ways, I would say, that it can be done.
Interesting. Thank you so much. For me, right? Like I've, I think the biggest challenge that I've had with this entire thing, right, is I I think I had thought that hey, this thing or this behavior that I need is not happening because there's a lack of bonding between the team, but that wasn't true at all. That behavior that I was seeing was happening because of a different like my diagnosis of the reason that hey, my team needs more bonding, so it will solve this other problem of mine, was off. So I think for me personally, like I've had to sort of, I've had mentors and who've helped me through this, but then I think that was a big one, that he just figured out like, is that really a bonding problem or not? Because that's where I have always messed up. That hey, is this a bonding problem? Is this a some other problem? Because I think yeah, like even we've been in a complete online organization since the start. I've never met most of my team members. We might meet a few of them next month, but it's like yeah. So I think that's a big deal. Like hey, is the problem that you're seeing or the reason why you think that you should do this, is it because of bonding? Is it really because of bonding? Is it because of something else? Because that's where again yeah. Perfect. I don't
Absolutely.
think we have any other questions though. So
It's a
yeah, thank
nice
you so
audience.
much.
Not too many questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I have 3 pages of notes, by the way. Right, like I
Oh,
literally
wow.
have 3 pages of notes, and just like all messy notes, which are the best ones. So
I
this is
love
going to be
those.
really helpful. Yeah, this is very very helpful. I appreciate that. If I have, if anyone has any questions regarding like hey, like I didn't understand this thing, that thing, I think is it okay if they reach out to you over, let's say, over LinkedIn or something?
Absolutely. Most welcome. Most
Perfect. So
welcome.
we'll
Anytime.
have, we've already tagged server. We'll tag him again. If you see this on YouTube, you'll see the link to his profile in the description as well. So thank you so much for doing this again. I really, really appreciate this. And if I have, I'll probably come back to you with questions myself.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm always there for helping.
Thank you.
Thank you.